CEO's incredible response to Cleaner's son's shocking warning discovered the power of compassion. Jake leaned against the cold steel of the high-rise, the flickering fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow in the empty conference room where he took his brief escape. The rhythmic pulse of the city below echoed his internal discord. Balancing work as a cleaner in this soaring building and being a father to Timmy tugged at his soul. Another day of wiping down surfaces and polishing floors to make ends meet, just enough to keep the home filled with laughter and homemade dinners. But both love and exhaustion weighed heavy on his shoulders. Did Timmy understand the fragility of their simple life? Did he know that one wrong decision at work could collapse everything he had built? Jake's thoughts were interrupted as a child's voice echoed from the break room where Timmy played quietly. He'd distracted himself with connections from his colorful drawings, but that afternoon, the clarity of childlike wisdom cut through the break room chatter. As Jake sipped his coffee, he caught snippets of heated discussion spilling out from the boardroom. There were serious budget cuts and the threatening stance of Rebecca, the powerful CEO. Panic clenched Jake's heart when he overheard terms like layoffs and cost efficiencies. The world outside their sanctuary didn't consider souls like Jake and his son, stood poised and polished against the lifeblood that fueled the corporate machine. But then suddenly the weight shifted. The unmistakable sound of Timmy's small feet pattered closer. With a brave face and wide eyes full of innocence, he peeked into the boardroom where he stood uninvited. What happened next rattled Jake to his core. Timmy, fueled by that innocent bravery, stepped into the glare of corporate power and confronted Rebecca without flinching. Jake barely let out a shaky breath as the boy's voice unfolded, calling out the importance of his father's work and the warmth he brought to the often cold corporate atmosphere. "You can't take that away. My dad makes the place feel like home," Timmy said, confidence ringing through his voice, shattering the ice encasing Rebecca's heart. Jake's chest tightened as he watched his son unwillingly thrust into a world far beyond his years, where boardroom decisions held life-challenging consequences. Would Timmy understand if things went sideways? Would he think it was his fault? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake held his breath as silence enveloped the room. Rebecca's eyes darted, caught off guard, her usual poise crumbling as she processed the poignant honesty of a child's plea. What was she going to do? The pressure to uphold her measures gnawed at her, competing against something new that bloomed within her, an awareness stirred by the courage of a boy standing up for his dad. But what would her shareholders think? Nightmares replayed in Jake's mind, losing his job and the life he fought so hard to preserve, facing Timmy's questions, the weight of their world crumbling into the unyielding concrete of reality. Dark thoughts pooled in Jake's gut as he watched Timmy's innocence clash against Rebecca's hardened exterior. Specters of shame and responsibility tangled in Jake's chest. Could a boy's courage change the outcome? Or was the city's heartless rhythm an unstoppable force, destined to trample theirs in the relentless pursuit of profit? As Rebecca stood, the room hushed, and Jake's heart raced. Every fate hung on that moment, his thoughts a whirlwind of dread. Would she silence the voice of compassion that Timmy ignited, or allow it to blossom into a decision that would redefine her? Jake braced himself for the storm, anxiety gnawing at him like a relentless tide, eager to reclaim its shore. Rebecca stood frozen, her mind racing through the ramifications of this unexpected confrontation. Timmy's words, innocent yet fierce, sloshed against the walls of her corporate fortress, echoing the values she had once held dear, but had long considered irrelevant. Why had she strayed from humanity in the midst of numbers, profit margins, and endless meetings? In that moment, Jake's heart was a locked door, held firm by worry and a deep-rooted trepidation. He watched as Rebecca took a tentative step forward, a light flickering in her eyes. This was the opportunity that teetered between hope and despair. "Your father," she began, her voice softer, unexpectedly gentle, "he really does make a difference here." There was a collective intake of breath around the room, a shift that could either deflate or ignite the tension that hung like damp fog. What if this moment turned to change? What if compassion won out against unyielding corporate logic? Jake's mind spiraled with possibilities. Did it really take a child's brave refusal to ask for compassion to wake the sleeping giant? While a flicker of hope sparked within him, another voice whispered fear. Fear of vulnerability, mingling with the harsh realities of their life. He had fought so hard to provide, to protect. What if this moment led to their undoing instead of salvation? He masked his anxiety behind the facade of a supportive father, unwilling to stir Timmy's innocent bravery. As a cleaner, Jake knew his realm, yet the boardroom felt like foreign soil, an arena of giants. He lingered in the shadows, wrestling with a growing urge to step forward, to seize this momentum and add his voice to the conversation. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about resilience and shared humanity. In that eager silence, Jake sensed a profound fracturing of the corporate code. Rebecca turned her gaze, meeting Jake's eyes for the first time. Beneath the power suit and composed demeanor, Jake saw a flicker of realization, one that mirrored his own. They both stood at a precipice, while one managed the machinery of commerce, the other existed as its lifeblood. Had compassion finally rung a bell in the cold, hard halls of industry? "Timmy," Rebecca said, her voice now filled with a sincerity Jake had hardly deemed possible, "thank you for reminding me what matters. We must remember the people behind our decisions. We must, as a company, ensure we protect all members of our team, including those who keep our workplace clean." Jake's heart soared at her response. The walls that once enclosed his fears quivered, but before he could fully embrace the swell of hope, a sinking realization threatened to ground him once more. What if this moment was merely a veneer? What if Rebecca's compassion was no more than a fleeting impulse, buried once boardroom discussions returned to cold facts and figures? "Thank you, Timmy." Rebecca's acknowledgement shifted to practicality, but we must have a plan, a sustainable model that accounts for everyone's roles. As she spoke, Jake felt the turmoil crash over him again. Would this plan include him? Or would he still remain a faceless entity, a mere statistic ready to be discarded? Jake stared at Timmy, who looked up, innocent eyes sparkling with a triumphant glow. This was more than a battle for a job. It had evolved into a greater challenge, one that assessed values and the essence of corporate ethics. The stakes had risen. With the tension thickening, Jake felt himself pulled into the center of it all, a reckoning of his place within this corporate world. Would he continue as a silent observer, or step into the conflict unfolding not only for his son, but for himself? The looming threshold of change sat heavy before him, simmering with urgency. As Jake wrestled with his next move, he felt the ground beneath him begin to shift. Would he confront his insecurities and articulate his worth, or would he dissolve back into the shadows, taking the easy way out? The time had come for decisive action. Amid corporate specters and the hope of a child, Jake stood at the crossroad of courage, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The boardroom, once an intimidating expanse of glass and steel, now felt more like a makeshift arena where raw emotions collided. Jake's heartbeat quickened. He could feel the weight of so many eyes on him, the anticipation hanging thick in the air. Change was in motion, and at its heart stood his son, a lighthouse guiding him toward an unknown shore. Rebecca continued to address the assembly, her voice steady and resolute. We have an opportunity to redefine our values, to create an ethos that lifts every team member. This means we need input across all levels. As she spoke, her gaze shifted from the elaborately crafted PowerPoint slides to the faces around her, grounding herself in the humanity of their shared experience. She was no longer just a CEO dictating charts. She was a leader, connecting with the essence of her team. To Jake, the weight of her words flew like arrows straight to the core of his being. Encouraged by his son's bravery, he felt the stirring of resolve, the incipient urge to step out of the shadows. But still, doubt clung to him like an unwelcome second skin. What could he possibly say that would carry any weight amidst the barbed sophistication of boardroom debates? Who was he in this world of suits and artificial smiles? Gathering his thoughts, he peeled the layers of fear that tangled around his heart. He had always taken pride in his work and the dignity that came with every sweeping motion of his mop. It was time to speak for all the invisible laborers like him, to show a side of the company that remained hidden from the shining figures of profitability. "Rebecca," Jake found himself saying, his voice unexpectedly steady. He had said her name so carefully, almost reverently, forging a connection through vulnerability. A hush fell across the room, and he felt centuries of hierarchical distance collapse into an intimate moment. "I appreciate what you're saying about extending compassion to all team members. But you need to understand, we're more than just numbers. We have families and stories that intertwine with this business." Jake's words flowed, and with each utterance he sensed that gravity shift. As if he cast a spell, the stoic board members leaned in. He could see the patterns of their lives woven into the fabric of this institution. Each one, once merely a gatekeeper of corporate might, now became individuals, reflecting curiosity and concern. "I'm not here to ask for favors," he continued, vulnerability edging his voice. "I simply want to remind you that our roles matter. The essence of this company isn't just the profits we report, but the lives we influence. We deserve a place in this dialogue, not just as employees you check off on a spreadsheet, but as people worthy of respect and dignity." The air in the room crackled with newfound energy. Rebecca's expression shifted, a storm of realization crossing her features, while Timmy's eyes sparkled with a blend of pride and expectation. Jake could feel his courage inflating like a balloon, bursting through the boundaries he had long respected. He realized that standing up for himself was not just an assertion. It was a clarion call to reflect on shared humanity in a system often drenched in anonymity. But still, lurking beneath his exhilaration was a whisper of anxiety. What would this mean for his position? The potential alternatives swirling behind the boardroom doors held perpetual uncertainty. Would Rebecca's newfound conviction hold fast or dissolve under the pressure of profit? He had cracked the shell of the hidden problem, but the real challenge lay ahead. As Rebecca prepared to respond, meeting his gaze with intent focus, Jake found himself standing at a precipice where every heartbeat echoed a singular truth. This dialogue had just begun. The unfolding landscape of the company and his life depended wholly on the next words spoken in that room, and there was no turning back now. "Let's implement this vision, not just as a strategy, but as a new foundation," Rebecca began, embodying the shift he had prophesied. But to make it happen, what would she say next? Jake's breath caught as he poised himself to learn what might lie ahead. He felt the impending change shake the very core of his identity, and with it the possibility of a new reality began to unfurl before him, the contours still unformed and ragged, but bursting with potential. "We must rethink not just our priorities, but our structure," Rebecca continued, her voice carrying the weight of commitment. "To that end, I need your input, all of you. We must hear from every corner of this organization, and I want to create task forces that include everyone, from management to those on the ground. We cannot move forward without understanding the full spectrum of experiences present in this company. Jake felt the stirrings of a possibility that had long eluded him. Was this real? An invitation to participate, to shape the very essence of the company he had served in silence for years? Yet, beneath the exhilaration lay a gnawing seed of doubt. Could he truly navigate this newfound channel of influence, or would it be washed away in the tides of corporate ambition? As the discussion resumed, the board members began throwing around ideas, their voices blending into a cacophony of proposals and strategies. Jake listened intently. While he had found his voice, chaos swirled around him. The complexity of corporate dialogue continued to baffle him. Concepts like stakeholder engagement and feedback loops drifted far above his practical understanding, and yet something deep inside him reverberated with a powerful urgency. With each passing moment, he could feel the transformative power of acknowledgement shifting underfoot, a concrete foundation for the personal growth he desperately craved. Perhaps now was the time to wield his voice not just as a whisper of dissent, but as a proactive participant in this group's dynamic structure. He envisioned the essential stories of those who cleaned the vibrant hallways of modern skyscrapers, who repaired broken machinery, who fought to ensure that every corner sparkled. Had he just become their representative? In an unexpected surge of confidence, he found the will to speak again. "I think," he interjected, nerves tightening his throat, "that we should also focus on sharing our experiences, perhaps through a platform where every employee can share their story. An anthology of sorts. We need to create a space where voices that have historically been silent can be amplified." The boardroom fell quiet, every set of eyes flitting toward him. A palpable energy began to pulsate within the room, and for the first time in his life, Jake felt as though he were part of something significant. He could feel Rebecca's gaze on him, glimmering with an unspoken affirmation. "Exactly," she replied, her tone sharp and invigorated. "This isn't just about accumulating data. It's about real stories. I'm certain that everyone's perspective would enrich our conversations." A sense of clarity washed over him. He realized that he could harness his newfound role to bridge the gap that had long existed between labor and management. It felt daunting, yet exhilarating, an audacious challenge laced with hope. Maybe this was the start of breaking the chains of an environment that had silenced voices like his own. As the meeting progressed, Jake felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Doubt transformed into determination, and he found himself engaging in dialogue, genuinely reflecting on strategies and their implications. Slowly but surely, fear became a distant echo, whisked away by the thrill of empowerment. However, shadows lurked at the periphery of his optimism. Earlier whispers of anxiety resurfaced, reminding him of the dangers that could accompany such changes. Not all ideas are welcomed, and was he prepared for the backlash that could come from challenging long-held traditions? The meeting waned into an energetic debate, revealing differing opinions among board members. Jake could sense the tension rise as some resisted change, clinging to the old values that had served them well, but ultimately lost their relevance. The turning point was near, and suddenly realities began to coalesce in Jake's mind. The time had come to face not just complacency, but the internal conflict he had buried for far too long. The fear of failure intertwined with an insatiable hunger for meaning in his work. He could either retreat to the comforts of anonymity, where risk was minimal, or embrace his role as a voice for change. With every spoken word, he felt light and heavy at once. Would he be able to find the strength within his convictions to stand firm against the resistance that surely loomed over this venture? "Let's put this into action," Rebecca encouraged, optimism and caution entwined in her expression. As the discussion swirled around him, Jake understood that a defining moment lay on the horizon, one that might illuminate his path away from fear and toward empowerment. But deep in the pit of his stomach was an imperceptible worry, the gnawing sense that courage without plans can be perilous. Would he manage to solidify both his newfound agency and the momentum for collective change? The air thick with possibility, Jake holstered a breath as he contemplated his next move, realizing that personal transformation often collides with the necessity of sacrifice. The stakes were rising, and if he were to step forward, he must place himself squarely in the crosshairs of impending conflict. The moment of truth was approaching. Would he be the voice of a change that could ultimately be met with resistance? Jake felt the pressing need to decide his stance as the echoes of impending challenge loomed larger with every passing moment. Jake's heart hammered in his chest as he absorbed Rebecca's call to action. This was not merely a moment of inspiration. It was a pivotal juncture in his professional life. Faced with an opportunity to influence the very culture of the organization, his mind raced with the enormity of what lay ahead. The room around him buzzed with charged conversations, the air thick with enthusiasm juxtaposed against apprehension. In the swirling dynamics of change, Jake recognized that his journey wouldn't be without its own set of trials. The weight of leadership felt heavy on his shoulders, and he questioned his ability to wield the influence he had just begun to embrace. As he processed the various proposals exchanged, a deeper awareness struck him. The link between personal experience and professional framework was no longer an abstract thought, but a tangible reality. No longer would he simply observe the changes swirling around him. Instead, he was poised to become a catalyst for those very changes. This realization bestowed upon him a newfound responsibility he hadn't anticipated. "Jake, what do you think?" A voice interrupted his contemplation. It was Laura, a fellow board member known for her fierce advocacy for employee welfare. She leaned toward him, her expression mixing curiosity and urgency. With hesitant resolve, he replied, "I believe the realignment begins by making sure every voice is represented, not just the management hierarchy." His voice carried a gravity he hadn't expected, echoing the sentiments he gathered from the workers whose lives remained on the periphery. Laura nodded, acknowledgement sparking in her eyes. "Absolutely. But how do you envision including those voices? We need actionable steps, not just aspirations." Her challenge resonated within him, igniting a flicker of resolve. This was what he had feared. The scrutiny of his ideas, the need for specificity to manifest change rather than merely voicing it. Aware that his thoughts required clarity, he took a moment before responding. "I think we could initiate a pilot program where selected employees from various departments come together to share their stories, perhaps in small focus groups. Their insights can form a foundational strategy document." His pulse quickened as he articulated his vision, fanning the flames of innovation that had ignited within him. The room remained quiet as members exchanged glances, weighing his proposal against their expectations. In that silence, Jake felt a mix of vulnerability and empowerment. He was no longer a passive contributor. He was a stakeholder with ideas that mattered. Rebecca broke the silence, her voice steady with support. "This is an excellent starting point, Jake. It's concrete and expresses exactly what we need: clarity in our engagement with employees." Encouraged by her reinforcement, Jake found himself swept up in a whirlwind of discussion. Ideas flowed around the room, each person building off his proposal, suggesting improvements and identifying potential pitfalls. The collective process quickly morphed into collaborative brainstorming. For the first time, Jake felt a powerful synergy brewing among the board members, a unity stemming from a common purpose. Yet as the debates heated up, doubts began to creep back in. What if they merely paid lip service to his ideas? What if the momentum fizzled out before it could grasp the effective change he sought? Would lower-tier employees feel overlooked once again, as they often had in previous initiatives? He shifted his focus back to the discussions, reminding himself that this was his chance. Not just a chance to voice, but to realize transformative potential. This was a moment that demanded courage, but also clarity. Behind every decision, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but it was countered by the spark of hope igniting within him. As the meeting drew to a close, Jake felt exhilarated, yet inundated with a flurry of decisions ahead. The morning's resolve glimmered with promise, but shadows of uncertainty also cast a long silhouette over his thoughts. Even as momentum built, could he truly navigate the complexities of implementation? With plans forming but lingering apprehensions, he lingered near the doorway as colleagues streamed out, laughter and chatter echoing off the polished walls. He needed a strategy that would not just elevate his voice, but also ensure that it represented those he sought to lift. Drawing a deep breath, Jake collected his thoughts. What would be his next step? How could he solidify these nascent plans into something actionable? He understood that it would require not just vision, but also tenacity and a willingness to face opposition and inertia head-on. As he left the boardroom, a chilling reminder flickered in his mind. Change does not happen without resistance. Would he find the resolve to sustain his initiative against potential backlash? The path to transformation was fraught with obstacles, but he was ready to confront them. With the weight of his ambitions pressing forward, he decided then he would reach out to employees the very next day. He needed their stories, their insights, their reality. The call to action echoed in his mind. He must transform the collective voice into a powerful force for change. Yet just as the clarity of his plan began to take shape, unease pooled in his stomach. Would the force of tradition and resistance prove insurmountable? As he walked toward the office, determination surged within him. But a lingering question remained. Who would stand with him when the tides began to turn? The future was uncertain, and Jake sensed that his resolve would soon be put to the test in ways he could never imagine. The following day dawned, with a brisk chill in the air, each breath Jake took visible in the frosty light. As he sat at his desk, the enormity of the task ahead felt more pronounced than ever. He had envisioned gathering the employees' insights, but the practicalities of executing such a plan were more daunting than he had anticipated. Would they be willing to share their stories? Would they even trust him enough to open up? Pam, the facility manager, passed by his office in a spirited discussion with a co-worker. Her laughter echoed down the hall, yet Jake couldn't bring himself to join in. Instead, he opened a blank document on his laptop, determined to outline his strategy. He began typing, fingers clattering loudly against the keys, an odd counterpoint to the joyful noise outside. His mind raced as he envisioned the focus groups who would attend. How would he ensure a diverse representation? More importantly, how could he make it a safe space for employees to express unfiltered thoughts? The emotional undercurrents he sensed in the workplace overwhelmed him. He needed to translate whether those were true sentiments or mere shadows of doubt. After drafting preliminary questions for the groups, doubt seeped in. Could these inquiries truly elicit meaningful feedback? Would they delve into deeper issues or merely skim the surface? Closing his eyes for a moment, he reminded himself that genuine change often began with uncomfortable conversations. "Jake!" The familiar voice of Rebecca jolted him from his thoughts. She leaned against his doorframe, vibrant energy radiating from her presence. "I just wanted to check in. How are you feeling about everything?" "Honestly?" Jake paused, choosing his words carefully. "I feel a bit overwhelmed. This is a bigger undertaking than I thought. I need to make sure I'm engaging with the right people in the right way." Rebecca nodded knowingly. It's a heavy load, but you've shown conviction. Remember, people will respond positively if they see your sincerity and dedication. They need to believe this will create tangible change. Her conviction struck a chord within him. Yet Jake wondered if he was strong enough to carry their hopes alongside his own insecurities. The weight of leadership was profound, pulling him toward a precipice where he must either soar or tumble. Would he possess the emotional resilience for the upcoming challenges? "Have you considered speaking to employees directly?" Rebecca suggested. "Sometimes sharing your vision face-to-face can spark enthusiasm and build trust." Jake mulled over her words, then realized she was right. There was no substitute for direct interaction. Diving into the heart of the issue was necessary, even if the thought terrified him. "I could hold an informal meet and greet. Maybe just a handful of people to start," he proposed, already envisioning the layout of chairs in the break room. "Exactly. Maybe open with your own experience. Share why this matters to you," she encouraged. It could create common ground. Her encouragement fanned the tentative flames of determination flickering inside him. He agreed, enthusiastically, but felt a knot in his stomach, mixing excitement with apprehension. Sharing such personal motivations felt vulnerable. Was he ready to expose his own insecurities to his peers? As Rebecca left, Jake was hit with a flash of realization. He didn't just have a professional obligation, he had a chance to foster deeper connections with the people he often observed from a distance. It involved a level of authenticity he had yet to embrace fully. Determined to keep moving forward, he pulled together a small list of potential participants, people representing various departments and experiences. Each name echoed in his mind, becoming both a reminder of the diversity within the workforce and a challenge to ensure everyone felt heard. Yet as he prepared to reach out, doubt seeped back in. Would these individuals really share their truth in front of him? What if they were resistant, unwilling to voice their struggles? Shifting his position, Jake sank deeper into his chair, wrestling with the reality of potential backlash. Anger and fear had a way of rising when change loomed. Those emotions could easily shift alliances within the company. He needed to think on his feet, ready to respond to any kind of resistance. Taking a deep breath, Jake resolved to frame his intention clearly in his next communication. Perhaps if he articulated why he was doing this and how their stories would matter, he could break through the barriers of distrust. As he drafted the email to invite the selected employees, determination solidified in his core. He knew he would be risking exposure, but failing to create those connections felt like a far greater risk. Just as he hit send, the hesitation returned. Could he withstand the coming swell of voices, potentially oppressive with skepticism and criticism? He reminded himself that while doubt roamed, so did the possibility of genuine connection, a chance to bend the tide of the corporate culture. The ghostly chill of uncertainty whispered in his ears, urging him to retreat, yet a fiercer fire ignited within. He was embracing this mission, ready to navigate the waves of emotion that would follow. Would Jake's vulnerability become a strength, or would it fracture under the strain of resistance? It was only a matter of time before the response would reveal the true measure of his influence. Jake's heart raced as he stared at the screen, the email now sent to the selected employees. The small thrill of action was quickly eclipsed by the fear of the unknown. He imagined their responses. What if they dismissed him? What if they turned their backs on the very idea he was trying to cultivate? He drummed his fingers on the desk, anxiety coursing through him like quicksilver. The next morning, a new wave of uncertainty hit him as he entered the bustling office. Familiar faces moved past him, each carrying the weight of their own stories. Could they open up about theirs? Jake's pulse quickened when he remembered Rebecca's words. Change would require vulnerability. Was he willing to show his own? He decided that he would start with a personal story to forge connections. The recollections of his upbringing, the humble lessons learned while working at his family's restaurant, boiled to the surface. The way he had felt invisible at times, believing no one would notice if he disappeared. If he could connect those feelings with their struggles, maybe it would pave the way for a deeper dialogue. In the crowded break room later that day, Jake found himself pacing, rehearsing his message in his mind. Would they appreciate him stepping outside of his role? Did sharing his earlier insecurities negate his authority, or would it humanize him? A knot formed in his stomach as he wrestled with this duality, the leader craving authenticity versus the persona molded by expectations. Around lunchtime, he finally gathered his handful of invitees. They settled in chairs, scattered haphazardly around a low table, some shifting in their seats, others crossing arms defensively. He took a deep breath, feeling the air thicken with tension. "Thank you all for being here," Jake began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I wanted to meet openly and learn from each of you. I think we can create a better work environment together." He shared his story of feeling overlooked, how it had shaped him. Each word struck a chord in his chest. For a fleeting moment, he noticed a flicker of interest in their eyes, a crack in the walls they had built. However, the silence that followed felt alien, oppressive. His stomach churned as he searched the group's expressions. Had he misjudged them, from apprehensive listeners to disinterested spectators? Doubt clawed at him, whispering that perhaps this was a mistake. Finally, a woman named Linda, her brow furrowed in thought, broke the stillness. "It's not often that we get to hear from someone at the top. We're just afraid it won't matter," she confessed, her voice low but firm. The honesty in her words sank into Jake like a heavy stone. "I can understand how that fear feels," Jake replied, heart pounding. "I want you to know that it matters. Every single voice in this room matters." Driven by a sudden surge of determination, he added, "If you share your thoughts, your experiences, it can truly change things around here." The room hummed with uncertainty, but that tension had shifted. It was now charged with potential energy. He could see the flickers of engagement in their eyes, sparking hope amid the fear. There was a pause, then another voice chimed in, a younger guy named Miles. "We often feel like no one is listening. Not really. Why should we think this will be different?" The question hung heavy in the air, and Jake's mind raced. This discussion was veering into treacherous territory. Would he retreat or stand firm in his commitment? "We're scared of change," he admitted, vulnerability clinging to his words. "But change is inevitable, and it starts with us. I may not have all the answers, but I want to learn. Together, we can shape what this place becomes." In that moment, as he made eye contact with his colleagues, he realized he wasn't just facing resistance, he was forging transformation. The room felt less daunting, a shared space instead. The hesitant comfort in the air signaled an understanding that while fragility existed, they were collectively embarking on something monumental. As the conversation began to flow, tentative but eager, Jake felt emboldened. There were stories to tell, challenges to voice. The potential for real change crackled in the space between them. Yet, as encouraging words and stories began to unfold, deeper fears tugged at him. What if others weren't as receptive? What if he stumbled at a critical moment, its ramifications echoing throughout the company? Jake swallowed hard. The day had already brought revelations, but all was still fragile. One step forward could shatter everything if not nurtured right. Would he be able to sustain this momentum against potential backlash? The path ahead was as promising as it was perilous, and when the time came to either lean into the challenge or withdraw into safety, he would have to summon everything he had learned and risk it all. With every heartbeat, the tension thickened around him, teasing the boundary of revelation that loomed just beyond reach. Would he be able to keep pushing for change, or would the encroaching doubts bring him crashing down? The following days unfolded like a delicate dance, each step measured and uncertain. Jake kept replaying the conversation in his mind, dissecting the varying responses he received. The promise of a new dynamic began to swell within him, yet a wave of internal conflict lingered, edging him closer to doubt with every pulse of doubt. In meetings that week, he noticed the stark contrast in the atmosphere. Where before silence hovered like a dense fog, now there were whispers, caution mixed with curiosity. Employees began to approach him, tentatively offering their thoughts and feedback. However, the weight of their vulnerability bore down on him. Were they genuinely willing to change the culture of their workplace, or had they simply become intrigued by his presence? Late one afternoon, as the late spring sun cast long shadows in the office, Jake sat with a steaming cup of coffee, staring blankly at his computer. Suddenly his thoughts danced to panic when he recalled how Linda and Miles had pointedly questioned the sincerity of his efforts. Their words were like echoes, reminders that transformation needed more than just good intentions. It required consistency and unwavering commitment. He forced himself to think through his next move. Should he follow up with each employee who'd engaged with him, or gauge the broader team's disposition with another discussion? The urgency to solidify the energy was consuming, and he felt the pressure of potential backsliding. More than individual voices, he needed a chorus of sentiments resonating through the company. That evening, fueled by inspiration, Jake found himself composing an email to the whole team, an invitation to a casual gathering. He decided it shouldn't just be about soliciting feedback. It should also be about building an atmosphere of trust. He crafted each sentence with care, wrapping his authenticity around an invitation to hear one another's experiences. As he hit the send button, the adrenaline coursed through his veins. This step was the boldest one yet. The night before the gathering, Jake lay awake with thoughts spiraling through his head. He grappled with an unsettling notion. Had he done enough? A sudden jolt of realization struck him. He hadn't shared other stories that could resonate even more deeply. The stories of his team members bore such potential. Did they know just how valuable and impactful their unique journeys were? He recognized a crucial first step, encouraging them to share their experiences. He leaned toward vulnerability, but this time he needed to transform his resolve into a collective act of trust and courage. The stories must come from the many, not just himself. Jake awoke to a reality tinged with excitement and trepidation. As he prepared for the day, he envisioned the gathering, how he would frame it, how he would promote that shared vulnerability. Stress, intertwined with anticipation, flooded his thoughts. When the clock struck the appointed hour, employees filed into the conference room, faces he recognized from the hallway. Those of his team and others who had seemingly blended into the background filled the seats. While addressing them, he felt that familiar knot in his stomach. "Thank you for coming," he began, willing his voice to remain steady. "I'm thrilled we're here to embrace the possibility of open communication within our team." He stationed himself firmly, but took a step back, casting a wider net. "What I want most today is to hear from you. Your experiences are vital. The process of transformation begins with shared narratives." A palpable tension hung in the air. The stillness was punctured when a quieter voice raised a hand, the familiar face of noon receptionist Maria. "Conversations like this do matter," she said, her words measured, eyes flitting to others, seeking approval. "But we need assurance things will change instead of just talking." Her angle of concern struck him with relentless clarity. This wasn't merely about dialogue, this was about steadfast dedication to action. What if he let them down? What if their fears of inaction became their truth instead? Jake's heart raced, and his response demanded careful consideration. "You're right, Maria. It can't just be about words, can it? I assure you I mean to embody our discussions. I plan to keep pushing forward despite fears." As he glanced around the room, searching for signs of understanding, he felt compelled to engage deeper. This moment could either solidify their trust or fortify their reservations. Would they embrace this opportunity, or shy away in skepticism. Determination swelled in him, yet the somber reality of resistance lurked closely behind. Each share that would follow could cement or crumble what he insisted on building. The stakes were rising. Would this group come together, or would he be met with critical silence again? A storm of uncertainty brewed just under the surface. This time, the moment had arrived to face truth more than ever before. The room spun with possibilities as he prepared to embrace whatever might lie ahead, aware the time had come to confront the real challenge. How far could he lead them without losing his footing, while uncovering the real power within their shared narratives? The air in the conference room crackled with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Jake stood at the front, feeling the heat of curious gazes piercing through him. He could sense the unity of purpose beginning to flicker, but apprehension danced behind their eyes, as if they were waiting for him to step out of line, to fail in his promise of authenticity. "Let's start with some ground rules," he proposed, trying to anchor the proceedings. "This is a space for honesty. Everything shared here remains within these walls. We're here to learn about each other and, hopefully, about ourselves." His voice wavered slightly, but he pushed through, reminding himself that imperfection could foster connection. Glancing over the group, he noticed Linda crossing her arms, a faint frown etched on her brow. She still held skepticism, and they needed to address it head-on. "I'd like to invite anyone to share their story. What brought you to this company? What experiences drive you?" He gestured toward the circle of eager faces, but predictably, silence followed. The first hesitant voice came from a junior programmer, Alex. "I've only been here a few months," he started, his hands trembling slightly. "But when I first joined, I felt lost. I thought everyone here already had their circles, their friendships." The nervousness in his tone was palpable, and Jake could almost feel the collective breath of the room, waiting for validation. "Alex, thank you for sharing." Jake stepped forward, leaning slightly to indicate engagement. "Many of us feel the same way, even if we've been here longer. It's a big step to admit it, and acknowledging feelings of isolation can highlight just how important our connections are." A subtle ripple of understanding passed through the room, perhaps the first alignment in shared vulnerability. Encouraged, Alex continued, his words gathering strength. "I didn't realize how much I wanted to be part of a team until I realized I wasn't." As others began to share their experiences, moments of doubt, struggles, and unexpected triumphs, Jake felt a significant shift in the environment. For each story shared, he offered reflective questions that deepened the discussion, recognizing underlying fears while fostering honesty. But how far could this openness stretch? What if someone dared to challenge him? Just as his pulse quickened, Linda raised her hand, her expression serious. "What happens if we share our vulnerabilities and things don't change? What if we still feel alone, or worse, ridiculed for our honesty?" Jake's stomach churned. This wasn't about providing answers. It was about admitting uncertainty. "That's a real possibility, Linda. But without speaking our truths, we'll never know. Change often begins with discomfort." He challenged himself. Was he able to remain steadfast in the face of such doubts? Could he ensure them of progress when their stories diverged? Tension brimmed, and he could feel the charged silence pressing down. The gathering transformed from a mere sharing circle into a crucible of trust. Jake could no longer hide behind his role. He needed to embody the vulnerability he encouraged. In a moment of courage, he decided to reveal his own struggles. "You may not know this, but when I joined this team, I faced my own fears of inadequacy. I felt lost, surrounded by talented individuals who seemed to possess everything I lacked." Voices shifted, and Jake felt the gravity of their shared humanity. The dialogue built, emotions flowed, and for the first time, laughter broke the tension, a warm recognition of common ground. Yet, The confrontation hung ominously overhead. Could he lead them toward tangible change, or merely fabricate a fleeting sense of togetherness? As individuals shared brave stories of loss, ambition, and vulnerability, Jake became acutely aware of the need for follow-through. This newfound connection bore the weight of responsibility. Without accountable actions, frustration would seep back in. What structural changes could he propose that genuinely addressed their needs, their emotions? The gathering ended, leaving Jake standing amidst the ebbs of excitement mixed with uncertainty. He realized the next step required more than just power in stories. It called for him to structure a path forward. As employees departed, he scanned the faces. Hope mingled with hesitation. They desired transformation, yet the trepidation echoed that change could still very well fall flat. Fueled by an adrenaline rush and uncertainty, Jake's heart raced. The shift from dialogue to decisiveness hovered in the air. Could he summon the courage to embody the role of a leader committed to growth rather than just conversation? Or would he falter when it came to acting on their shared vulnerabilities? The moment of truth loomed ominously, pressing on him with relentless urgency. Jake stood in the empty conference room, remnants of collective vulnerability still lingering in the air like an electric charge. He could feel the crucial shift occurring within the organization. But as he reviewed the past discussions, an urgent realization cemented within him. Words alone would not suffice. He needed to transform dialogue into action. In the following days, productively channeling the energy from those shared stories became his singular focus. He meticulously documented the insights gathered from the gathering, synthesizing their experiences into actionable initiatives. Jake believed genuine engagement required jumping beyond rhetoric. It demanded visible commitment to change. When the document outlining proposed changes was ready, he set a meeting with Rebecca, racing against the clock to convey the urgency and potential these ideas held. The raw enthusiasm coursing through him propelled him forth, mingled with simmering apprehension. Could he articulate this vision in a manner that would resonate with her corporate perspective? "Jake," Rebecca greeted as he entered her office, "what do you have for me?" The concentration in her eyes gave him a fragile comfort. He laid open the blueprint, detailing each proposed action with clarity, lending strength to the voices that emerged during their emotionally charged discussions. "I want to initiate a series of employee-led task forces," he urged, his heart pounding. These groups would focus on enriching workplace engagement through real initiatives based on employee insights. We can't just gather stories, we need to act. Rebecca leaned back, chewing on his idea, her brow slightly furrowing. Could she see the potential? "This is a step in a good direction, Jake, but we need specifics for implementation. Can you handle how to mobilize these initiatives?" Her concern pricked at his insecurities, yet amidst the uncertainty, a belief began to solidify. He was capable. "Yes," he asserted, feeling more grounded with each passing moment. "I'd collaborate with individuals from every level to ensure representation. We can foster community within our workforce, bridging gaps and highlighting shared goals." Rebecca's demeanor shifted as she absorbed his sincerity. "I can support this plan, but you need to lead it." With those words, a fiery resolve ignited within him. Jake spent hours devising a timeline, leveraging initial interest, and expanding on the revolutionary energy that had begun to shift the company's ethos. He rallied his peers, inviting them to join the task forces, and initial excitement translated into a chorus of commitment, a palpable drive to connect amidst the corporate stratosphere. Weeks turned into months, and the company gradually transformed. Each task force blossomed into rich dialogues and pivotal projects outlining areas of improvement. Lines of communication opened further, illuminating voices once suppressed in anonymity. Jake, now secure in his leadership role, was recognized not merely as a cleaner advocating for change, but as a catalyst for a shared vision. In time, external validation came. The company received accolades for its cultural shift, applauded for its embrace of inclusivity and enhancement of engagement metrics. Jake embodied a new confidence, a solid conviction formed from the struggle he once faced alone. The whispered fears that had once haunted him began to dissolve into affirmations of competence. In a celebratory meeting marking this immersion into collective growth and acknowledgement, Rebecca stood before her team. "I want to extend appreciation not just for numbers. Jake has exemplified authentic leadership. Without your stories and his drive to lead towards tangible change, our progress would have remained stagnant." The room erupted in applause, but Jake felt a deeper resonance within. The true achievement lay in the stories brought to life, proactively shared and uplifted through their voices. Jake had not only achieved professional recognition, but also embraced the burdens of responsibility with grace. He had proven that effectively wielding vulnerability could cultivate bridges of connection where once there were walls. Timmy's innocent bravery had sparked this transformation, and as Jake thought of him, brightness radiated through him. Now equipped with solid integrity and purpose, he relished each moment of fulfilled aspiration. He had conquered self-doubt and emerged unfaltered, a confident leader, respected and impactful. As the future loomed in possibility, he stood firm with pride, eager to nurture the evolution of humanity within the cold corridors of commerce. Jake had transcended fear, igniting change, not just for himself, but for every voice woven into the fabric of the company. This was a solid beginning, a promise fulfilled. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support content like this. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.